Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello, and welcome to episode 144 of Mythos Busters. I'm Sean, and joining me later this month, yet it's still the same night, it's Ian. Hey, Ian.
Hello.
Still here.
Yeah.
Guess who's back?
Back again. Yeah.
We've got a loosey-goosey Friday night, and we're like 3 hours into this recording, so it's going to get loopy and fun. We've got a great episode for you guys tonight. We're going to get through our normal intros, a little bit of reminder and news action going on, a very special message from the Arkham political front, which I'm looking forward to. And then tonight's discussion topic is a topic that we've done before, and I think we may have done this in some form even more than once, but it's one of my favorite things to do when we just talk about card games, and that's to share our favorite cards that we believe are underrated. We catch a lot of flack for talking about cards that we think are not so good, those cards that we are not so hot on. But no one ever complains when we talk about underrated cards, so I feel like this one's going to be a home run.
You'd be surprised.
I often am. Oh yeah, but and then of course we'll round it out with some tentacle time. Okay, so quick reminder that in early 2023 at sometime TBD, we're going to do an episode on Arkham house rules, and we're collecting them like that most ravenous of collectors, like Tanalir Tavon. Is that the collector? Tavon?
Sure.
Where my
we'll go with that.
At?
I just know the character is the collector, so
It's Benicio del Toro.
Yes, that one.
We are collecting your house rules, so send them to us. You can either call into our hotline at 203-493-6984 and leave us a nice little message explaining your house rules and how you use them, or if you prefer, you can send them to our Gmail inbox. I could have just said email, couldn't I have? That's mythosbusterspod@gmail.com. Okay, so beyond that, I will remind everyone that you can call our hotline for whatever reason you want to leave us a comment, question, discussion topic, to disagree with us. So tonight we have a very special message on the Arkham political front. So stay tuned for this message.
Charlie Kane promised the people of Arkham a safer future. He made a lot of promises. Lower taxes, better schools, less crime. All of these lies. Murder, occult activity, gang violence, and otherworldly influences have been on the rise since his election. Scandals have also followed his every step, from his extended vacations to Tokyo to his network of suspicious couriers smuggling weapons and trafficking allies around the world. Kane's focus clearly isn't on Arkham. Even when addressing his constituents' concerns, Mayor Kane was caught selling humans as trophies. Is that what we want to teach our young deep ones? Charlie Kane. Bad for Arkham, bad for the world, bad for the outer worlds. Paid for by Cultists for a Darker Tomorrow.
The opinions reflected herein don't necessarily reflect the opinions of Mythosbusters Incorporated. This is a paid advertisement. What other political disclaimers are there? Yeah, so that's fun. I have a suspicion as to who it is, but they didn't leave their name, so I quite enjoyed that voicemail. Y'all, if you want to get silly with us, please do it. I love it.
Yes.
Call in more often. We love hearing from you. That's 203-493-6984, and thank you for the what was the organization? The Cultists for a Darker Tomorrow. We appreciate your patronage.
Yeah. Speaking of silly, remember back in the day when we would do the was it iTunes reviews, and people would have us read it and certain voices.
Shit, have we checked in on that recently?
No.
I don't. That promise we made that we completely abandoned.
Yeah, I doubt anyone has left one, but it would be funny if there were any like in the queue that we never got to.
Oh no, I really shouldn't go out and read podcast reviews live on an episode, but here we go.
No, don't do that.
See, the reviews aren't as accessible as they used to be. I also think that I feel like fewer and fewer people are on Apple products. Is that fair to say? Is Apple losing market share nowadays amongst the
have to
niche tabletop gamer
so.
demographic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly. Like, and even the Apple stuff is like through the podcast app versus like the iTunes stuff. So I don't know how that affects it. I mean, for my part, I pretty much moved over to Spotify for listening to podcasts, even myself. So, yeah.
Well, if there's anyone out there who gave us a 5-star review, point us at it. Let us know. We owe you. That still exists. You can give us if you give us a 5-star review on the podcast, we will read it with a terrible impression of your choice in the podcast. So if there's any outstanding to whom we owe, let us know. Yeah. It's just like there are some things that I kind of want to go through the early days and maybe pick some of those threads back up. Nick, hey, I can do that now. Can you? Please don't. All right. Well, hopping in and a few news reminders, as we mentioned on the last episode, the meme contest for 2022/2023 is live. It's here. It's happening. Send us your original Arkham memes. Email them to mythosbusterspod@gmail.com. Please limit them to 5 memes per entrant. Submissions will be accepted until January 20th, and then we're going to do our annual reveal stream where we go through the memes. We'll see how many we get this time. We've been able to get through all of them in the past. I feel like we're getting to that point where we might have to pick our favorites. But yeah, so it's gonna be a really good time. Send them to us. I always treasure the meme contest. There's some really good shit that comes out of them. Well,
yeah, for sure.
Well.
And stuff that gets like constantly referenced for like at least the year afterwards, if not more.
Like a meme.
Yeah. Funny how that works.
in the true definition of the word.
Well.
I was so sad. Okay, like quick aside, I was so sad that when I actually played Daniela when all 5 of us were in the room together, and that weakness only showed up one goddamn time. How fate? Why would you do this to me? I mean, that one time was great, but
yes, yeah, we wanted more.
Anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, please, I would highly recommend that if you have a moment, go and find. We've got a couple of YouTube videos where we go through the memes that have been submitted the past couple of years. One, Maxine Newman, and I believe Jeremy joined us on the last one to read through these Arkham memes, and it's always just a grand old time. So yeah. Ian, what's going on with BusterCon?
BusterCon is coming up in several months, but it is coming.
Do you believe us yet?
We wanted to give you plenty of notice. The BusterCon is going to take place in May of next year, 2023. The dates are May 18th through 21st. Again, that's May 18th through 21st. Gonna have a bunch of events related to Arkham Horror, the card game, of course. Probably some podcast related stuff. Definitely some dead CCGs being played. The important part, right? Maybe some soccer balls being kicked. We'll see. Anyway,
I'll take memes I thought would die immediately for 500 hours.
Yeah. We will release the actual real details soonish. definitely more to come. But for now, we just wanted people to be able to mark your calendars and request time off from work, whatever else you need to do, get your soccer training regimens in. And we will release more details about stuff like hotels and event calendars and ticketing and all that good stuff. But for now, just set aside that time if you can, because we'd love to have you come join us in Minnesota at the Game Center, which is where we will be holding BusterCon.
We'll be sure to run both blizzard and tornado drills because either is possible in May.
I have experienced a little bit of those.
Hashtag trigger.
so far in my trips to Minnesota. And along those lines, not blizzards and tornadoes, but BusterCon, we'd love to gauge your interest in attending through a handy little attendance survey that we have cooked up, and by we I mean Justin. So we'll include the links to this Google form, this attendance survey, in our show notes, and also if you're on our Discord server, check out the BusterCon 2023 channel. The survey should be pinned there. It's very fast, just if you could take couple minutes to fill that out, and that's just a chance for us to get a sense of who's coming to BusterCon.
Hell yeah. And we hope to see y'all there. This is going to be a really good time. We talked about it on the last episode. Thankfully, thanks to the folks at the Game Center reaching out to us for Arkham Knights, we got to wet our feet with the whole running an event at the Game Center thing. And we had a really good time at Arkham Knights. People seem to receive at least the stuff that we put on fairly well. So again, just wait until we have both hands on the wheel, baby. It's going to be fantastic. So excited. There may or may not be like karaoke one night. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Okay. I feel like
it's possible.
We've talked about karaoke.
It is feasible.
Like every Gen Con we went to, and then Arkham Knights, and now BusterCon. But yes, it is something that could happen.
I mean, you can do karaoke anywhere if you're brave enough.
Yes, that's true.
Excellent. Well, possibly a record for us getting to the main topic. This is probably gonna be a high and tight episode for you guys this week. Let's break in to our underrated cards. We've done this before. I really do enjoy championing cards that I have personally found great success with that I feel like other people have maybe missed. Or okay, so I guess maybe back up. Disclaimer. Let's talk about the word underrated for a second.
Yes, let's.
It's a little loaded. We exist in a certain sphere that is partially of our own making, and a lot of the Arkham that I talk about is with like 4 other people. So small circle, small sphere. When I am talking about an underrated card, I am just talking about a card that I don't think I've seen many people talk about. Doesn't mean people aren't talking about it. So if you find yourself at any point during our discussion here yelling at your headphones that you've been playing this card since it released, and how dare you call it underrated, I get it. You're not wrong. But that's my barometer.
Yeah, it's funny because I went back and listened to at least part of the last episode we did on this topic. I didn't get to make it through the whole thing, but it's funny because we opened with a similar caveat to that episode of underrated cards, and I think we have to do it every single time because underrated is such a kind of nebulous and contextual term. It totally depends on your context, like you said. In my case, like, I'm mostly playing solo. My meta is mostly me, and then obviously you all, who I talked to a lot about Arkham. And then beyond that, it's really a lot of seeing the conversations, and even then I feel a lot less plugged in than I used to be, just because
same.
Our Discord server has swollen it to a very large size over the years.
An engorged cesspool of love in Arkham.
So it is not as easy as it once was to keep abreast of all the conversations. So yeah, that barometer itself is a little bit even more iffy than it used to be. But yeah, when trying to figure out, this was a mixture of like, okay, how often do I see people talk about this card in like Discord conversations, or like how often does it pop up on Arkham DB or whatnot? And then
like Arkham DB, like I'll surf deck lists every once in a while, and
sure,
just like that's there too. Like how often do I see this in a deck list?
And then part of it was like almost for myself, like what cards are underrated for myself, like cards that I don't give a lot of, that maybe I don't talk about enough, but when I stop to think about the card, I'm like, you know what, that's a card I use a lot, or that's a card that I actually think is a pretty good card, but I don't give it as much attention as it should. So
that's a really good point. Like that plays into my perception of it too. Many of the ones that I have on my list are ones that I at one point kind of was like meh, but then I actually tried it and changed my mind. So
yep.
Okay, I realized I didn't pull up my list before now, so let's do that. Ian, why don't you lead us off? What's your first underrated card?
Sure. So I tried to pull a few from each class. So this first
you
one,
did better than I did.
This first one I picked because I'm not sure how people actually rate this card now, but I do remember when it first came out, and even for a good amount of time after this card came out, people often seem to express feelings that it wasn't the best ally around. This is an ally, and that is Alice Lexley.
Oh, thank God! I thought you were going to drop Henry Wan on us right now.
No,
and I was about to upend the podcast. No, continue, please.
Yeah, Alice Lexley. Again, I imagine probably people are using her more now. But Alice Lexley gives you +1 intellect, and after you discover a clue, exhaust Alice Lexley, and you deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. I think one of the things that stopped her when she first came out is a lot of
hang on. Sorry, Ian, to interrupt. One thing I want to do, and I thought about this earlier, didn't mention it to you. One thing I want to do from here on is when we mention a card, I want the other person just hip shot, give it like their opinion 1 out of 10. Just to get nice. a small sample, an extremely small sample size of like the other person's perception of that card.
Okay.
Luxley?
Alice Lexley.
She's like a 4 or 5. So yeah. Hit me, daddy.
Okay. So I think what happened when she first came out is because the class she's part of, people were like, do I need an intellect boost? And do I really need like this conditional damage that triggers off of discovering a clue, which is maybe not the main goal in life for most Guardians. But I think for my perspective, as the card pool is expanded, there's just a lot more tools to get Alice to go off. You know, there's even stuff as simple as like scene of the crime. You play that first action because there's an enemy there, you get a clue, and then you're dealing 1 damage to it, and then you can go from there because you're going to do that scene of the crime anyway. But there's also more and more cards that have come out, I feel like, that let you just straight up grab a clue even as a guardian. And so I think that's where Alice gets more play, especially because we've got more play styles that have been like on the tankier side for guardian, which is about like, hey, I'll take attacks to get something done. So I think Alice also plays along with that kind of play style. So I don't think it's an ally that goes in obviously any Guardian deck, or one that's just focused on killing and is never going to get a clue. But I think as the card pool is expanded, Alice has a lot more use.
Yeah, and you're right. The thing that has always stopped me is I kind of glazed past the intellect boost, which is significant for Guardian level 0. That's like the only option, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Four cost is not nothing. 2/2 is good. Like the thing that always stops me is, I want it to be like Roland, where I kill an enemy and I get a clue. And by Roland, I mean Greta.
Yeah.
But we already have that ally, so like trying to conceive of it in the opposite direction in Guardian, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this out there. Maybe is a thing that becomes more apparent to solo players, where when you approach a Guardian, you're thinking about it in the what do I do for clues context more often than you would as a multiplayer predominant player.
Sure.
So like that she's good. Working a hunch, if you can take that, that's a good way to proc it. Oh, Banjo Thulu Greta plus Alice, Porque no los dos.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean,
There
that's a hell of a resource sink, but like that's a good pair of allies too.
If you can pull it off, yeah.
Interesting. So, who would look hardest at Alice that can take her?
Well, I think there's always a play there for Alice, is not just like for your main guardians, but people who have like the off class access. So when you're thinking about like a Joe Diamond, for example.
Oh man, Banjo Thulu's totally right. Alice is amazing in Scarlet Keys. Investigate, grab a clue, ping. What are they called before you reveal them? They're not decoys.
No.
Is it just a shadows card?
They're just like concealed.
Concealed,
cards.
yes, concealed cards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ping a concealed card. That's really good. +1.
Maybe someone like Carolyn, who is just maybe potentially on the more clue side anyway.
Sure.
I could see that being a potential route there.
Like a Roland or a Joe, maybe. How about Vincent? Do you think Vincent looks at her?
That's a good. What's Vincent's deck building again? I'm trying to remember.
He's Seeker off class Guardian.
Seeker 0/3, and then
cards that
15,
heal.
and then up to 15 other Guardian and or Survival.
Oh yeah. Okay, so he's Carolyn. He's got Carolyn's deck building formula.
Yeah, I could see that. Like you're boosting up your intellect, getting it up to that 5, which is pretty good, and then you're probably doing a good amount of this. And I so far as I've built Vincent, he's pretty flexy, where I'm doing like getting clues, but also doing some killing. So that like Alice is definitely fitting into that flex style, I think.
Okay, all right, interesting. Yeah, and I guess kind of what I'm driving at is, what do you think differentiates an investigator who just gives Alice a total pass versus like who looks at her?
Yeah. I mean, I think it kind of comes down to that, that you are probably running it on the more flexy side, like, because the ally slot is so valuable.
Yes,
like that's one of the most valuable slots in your deck.
Yes.
So if you're gonna devote it to something like this, it's not because you want it to be incidental, but because you are doing a little bit of cluing, you're doing a little bit of damage dealing, and you can have a mixture of both in your deck. So I think really any of the flexy builds is where Alice lives.
Okay. All right. I dig. Well, speaking of flexi ally cards, I teased like 2 of my biggest entries to this list on the last episode, and I'm regretting my choices because I've like taken all of the thunder out of my own arguments. But we'll go ahead and lead off with Summoned Hound. So now I don't know how underrated Summoned Hound is. I think one of the reasons that I don't hear it talked about, or I don't see it in a lot of decks, is because the ask is really big, right? Like the ask of the Summoned Hound, ally slot, arcane slot, and a weakness shuffled into your deck. Like, it's not nothing. And I feel like that ask scares a lot of people off from the Summoned Hound. Oh, but ladies and gentlemen and NBs. It is such a damn good card. It is so good. I would say that a lot of investigators don't even care about the weakness. Like, yeah, it's not nothing, and when you draw it, it sucks, and you have to deal with it. But the value you get out of a summoned hound is so good. So let's just talk about that. We talked about it last episode. You get a free action, a free triggered ability. I always want to call it an action. It's not an action. That's the point. To investigate or fight at a base 5.
Mm-hmm.
So with one summoned hound out, that's good enough. But like you get the set out, and suddenly you just like you're walking around 2 dogs that just do all the work for you.
Yeah.
So that said, I think the weakness is the biggest piece, right? Because if you're using those, like the dogs themselves, the hounds themselves, I think justify their ally slot for what they can do pretty easily. The weakness scares a lot of people off, and that's valid. But I do think, particularly in Survivor, there are great ways to get around that weakness. As I mentioned last episode, Flare and a chance encounter, upgraded a chance encounter, to be clear, are both fantastic. One of the decks that I've used the Hound in is an Agnes deck that also uses Crystalline Elder Sign. So suddenly now those fight and investigate tests are swinging in at 6 base. Like you don't even have to do much most of the time. And then, like I said last episode, like in Charlie, they're insane because then suddenly you're working Bonnie into the equation, who can give you a boost for that test if you need it. And then in doing so, readies one of the hounds and you get to do it again. Like, y'all, if you have been scared away from the fierceness of the hounds, if you have heeded the sign of Beware the Dog, I would give it a second look. Those hounds are very, very good.
I will admit I haven't looked at Summon Hound for a long time.
Oh, I missed the thing. Ian, what's your hip shot hip shot review? God damn it, I'm so bad at this.
Oh, it's
Think back to before my impassioned, brilliantly constructed argument.
It kind of goes along with what I was just saying, like pre-Charlie coming out, I'd say maybe like a 3. And after Charlie, I'm up to like a 5, maybe.
Okay, all right. So
or 6.
You're middling at best.
Yeah. And it is the weakness. The weakness scares me. I already talked in the last episode passionately about how much I hate enemy weaknesses. And so this kind of functions in that way. But yeah, it's a fair
fear.
Yeah, so Summon Hound lived in my card box for a long time until Charlie came along, and then I brought back the Summon Hound and working amazingly in the Charlie deck. So I'm just trying to decide, like, would I play it outside of Charlie or not? Like, yeah, it's definitely a powerful ability. It's just that weakness. So I guess the real question is, would I play it without access to like the cheating cards like Flare or Chance Encounter, to which, you know, then you just get all upside and no downside.
I mean,
and I don't know yet. I haven't decided.
There are ways to quickly dispatch the Hound. The biggest one is Spectral Razor. You just keep a Spectral Razor in your hand. That's a 3 damage for 1 shot, like done and dusted. But beyond that, I would say that probably without the shenanigans, I would probably only look at the Summoned Hound in a Mystic deck that is combat focused, so that way that extra enemy isn't as big a deal. But then the Summoned Hound just gives you the ability to flex.
Sure. Can you power word the Unbound Beast? Let me see.
Oh, is it? Is it?
It's not elite, right? It's
not elite. Ian, look what you just did. Look what you just did for my argument. Well done, sir. I thank
you. Interesting. You know, especially when you have the upgraded power word where you're like using it to do stuff to other enemies.
Fuck, well, let me go make my Caesar Milan deck now. But yeah, anyway, so I will
I think
always,
it's worth a look.
Yeah, I will always admit that the ask is not small.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get around it with shenanigans, and it's awesome. And if you can't, it's still not that bad to mitigate for the upside that you get.
Mm-hmm.
I think it looks scarier than it is, as most dogs do.
Sure. Fair. I was trying to think of like other ways to mitigate it, and everything I could think of involved a different ally. So maybe if you have some other ally slots, like I was thinking of, well, would you use Alyssa to keep peering at your deck to see whether it's coming up?
Sure.
And then potentially bury it. Or
scroll, not prophecy, scroll of secrets.
Yeah, I always get those ones confused.
Prophecies is the draw heavy one. Secrets is the one that only got played after it got boosted by the FAQ. Because it went from being a hard action to a free triggered ability.
Yeah, which is very important.
It's super important.
But yeah, if you had a way to manipulate or at least see when it's coming, that might help. Which is, you're kind of putting resources into mitigating the summon hound, but it might be worth it, depending on what it's giving you.
Here's the thing. What I would recommend to tiptoe up to this, to understand it, is because the ask seems really intimidating, and if you haven't seen the upside, you don't understand how good the upside is. Once you understand how good the upside is, the ask doesn't seem as big. So try it out in a deck that uses shenanigans to get it into play. Would recommend trying it out in Charlie. It was a blast. And then once you see how good it is to have that option available, then your noodle will start noodling about like, all right, well, how easy is that weakness really?
I do like when my noodle starts noodling. Yeah, I mean, I definitely experienced the power of Charlie, so that does make me a little bit more open to it. I mean, a free extra fight or investigate, which I mean, those are like some of the key actions in the game. Each turn is not nothing.
No. And a base 5, even. Which is more than most investigators deal with.
Okay.
Look, you're looking for I will send you my Charlie build. It owns. It's so good.
I do love a good Charlie build.
All right, what you got? What's next?
I'm also going to jump to the Mystic class for this one. This is a card from a mechanic that was very hot when this particular cycle came out. And then I feel like it cooled down a lot. And again, this is all just my subjective experience of what I see people talk about. And my own experience that I used this card a lot when it came out, and then I have not touched it since. And this is the Chthonian Stone. Okay.
6.5.
Review.
6.5. Yep.
Okay. So for those of you who don't remember, Chthonian Stone is a mystic asset, and you seal one of the bad stuff tokens, other than the autofill, obviously.
Now, are you specifically talking level 0, leveled up, both of them?
Both of them.
Okay.
Both of them, really. Yeah. And like I mentioned, like I feel like the seal mechanic when it came out obviously was the hot new mechanic. So
it sure
was experimenting with it. And then I feel like it kind of fell away a little bit. And then the thing with the Chthonian Stone is it takes up a hand slot, and after you reveal an autofill, then it gets brought back to hand. So it doesn't discard it, at least, but that's the level 0 version. The upgraded version is pretty much the same, except for it gives you some charges. So instead of just automatically going back to hand, it's gives you a few chances at it. The reason I like this one is because I think sometimes we underestimate how bad certain bad stuff tokens are in scenarios. There's often one of the bad stuff tokens in each scenario that is just freaking terrible.
That's true.
That just has something that's really backbreaking, and of course that's the one that keeps popping up. So if you're able to just straight up seal that, even for, a few turns before this goes back to hand, that might be worth it. It is asking a lot at 3 cost. Hand slot and Mystic, maybe, depending on build, that's a big deal. Maybe it's nothing. I think it's more so the cost and the time to play it. But overall, I think it's something that's worth thinking about those really bad stuff tokens. The really bad stuff.
Yeah, right. I think I agree with you in that, like, the biggest mental hurdle to this one is that, like, Seal was really hot when it came out, and then we kind of forgot about, like, how fun Seal was. Because the problem with Seal is that you never actually see it work.
Yes.
It's not like you pull the token, cancel the token, and get the that instantaneous rush of having that token be canceled. It's just never in the bag. So it's like this imperceptible benefit that even those of us, and I would count myself among those who like heavily played Chthonian Stone when it first came out, you just kind of you forget about it, I guess. It just fades to the background, and it doesn't become as apparent. And that's a hurdle.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of if you remember, like, the early days of Jim. A lot of people were very down on Jim, and especially his builds that were built around like bag manipulation stuff. And I think it's for that exact reason that it's hard compared to flashier stuff when you just like drop 3 or 4 damage on something or just hoover up clues. Those are very obvious that you're doing something for the game. But yeah, this type of bag manipulation stuff, when you don't get to actually see tangibly what it's doing, they just tend to... they don't live as large in your memory, and so for that reason I think it makes people kind of undervalue what they do for you.
Well, and I think, and this honestly depends more on who I'm playing with than anything else. But there are some games where I'm doing constant math on the bag, and there are some games where I'm just like shooting from the hip on everything. And this is just me being a chameleon, I guess, as a gaming partner. But when I play with someone who is a little bit more analytical and wants to know, like, how many tokens could fail right now, you're always going to be down. Well, you're not always, but you're more often going to be just like one more token than you would have been once the Chthonian Stone pulls one out.
Yeah,
presumably.
This is kind of a tangent, but there was a while when I played this game when I used to actually have a second bag of tokens. And what I would do is set out the bag token, like all the tokens in the bag. I would just put them on the table and kind of order them like from the highest modifier to lowest.
Yep.
And then as the bag got modified, I changed that. So it's basically my reference guide of what's in the bag at any period of time.
Yeah, you're not the only one to do that.
Yeah, and it was actually really helpful. The only reason I stopped doing it is because it's like more setup to do work for the game. Yeah, which there's already quite a bit of setup. But yeah, I mean, if you have time to do that, it's definitely helpful to just see that, and it does really help you kind of evaluate a card like Chthonian Stone more because you just actually see it disappear and how it affects that distribution.
Yeah, here's the thing. All right, I'm gonna get like. All right, anyway. So most of the time when I'm talking about the value of committing a card, the way I've come to frame it in my time in Arkham Horror is how many tokens does this card knock out after I commit? I mean, barring any like additional effects I'm trying to get out of like a skill or something. How many tokens does this knock out? So those effects modify the numerator. Whereas Chthonian Stone modifies the denominator. if you see what I'm saying.
Getting all fractional.
I mean, it's like 3rd grade fractions, but yeah.
Talk fractions to me.
But and I think that's what makes it less perceptible is that you're just completely modifying the bag itself rather than playing with the pulls that you have, which is easier to see and perceive.
Yeah, I agree.
But to your point earlier, I do think that even nowadays, it's an easier ask in Mystic to take up that hand slot. It's harder in other classes, but you know, as long as you're running your bog standard mystic that's not doing anything crazy like Amina.
Yeah.
Hey,
Amina can get this out for quote unquote free.
Yeah. I mean, you still have a hand for your sign magic. It's cool.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I think one of the things that kind of showed a value to me of this kind of card is all the different Iron Man preps we did, because part of the process that me and Scott would often do is identify like what are the really bad stuff token effects for each scenario. And when you start outlining that for a whole campaign, then it becomes really easy to see like how impactful a lot of those tokens are. Like, oh, we really need to avoid this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the kit, but if your hand slots aren't like terribly spoken for, and I don't think that's a weird thing to happen in Mystic. Yeah, it's good, and being able to, it's not like so trying to think of some of the other like token manipulation or token picking that we have. It's not like Dark Prophecy or Premonition. Like you get to go pick the token you want.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can tailor it to the scenario, which is pretty huge in the realm of, token manipulation.
Yeah. I'd say the other thing that goes against it, and I'm arguing against myself here, is just that mystics in general tend to be pretty setup heavy. Like,
yes,
the average mystic needs to get a lot of assets out just to do the things it wants to do, like get spells out, maybe some accessories. So when you're adding this on, which is probably something it's probably not a part of your core rig. This is like a kind of a little a bonus item that might be hard to find time/resources to get this out on top of everything else you need to get out for your core assets. But if you have a way to accelerate that, get extra actions, extra resources, then it might be easier. Like even someone like Dexter, who's able to like switch out assets, that might be an option.
Ooh, Dexter's not a bad play. Like,
yeah,
you have that in play as long as you can until you hit that point in Dexter where like, oh, I need to get this thing out, but what do I Dexter out? And then in desperation, that's an option for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Arguing in desperation is the best case to make for a card being good, but you follow me.
Yes, I took that journey.
All right. Well, since we're talking about token manipulation and in this world of token probability, we throw another one out there. I don't think this is terribly underrated. I just only ever currently hear about it in one specific context. So Silas, it turns out, it has this ability to make Unrelenting a bonkersly stupid card. Because it works exactly like a lot of skills. It works exactly like you want it to with Silas. Where, with him, you can either pull bad tokens out of the bag and still bounce it back to your hand after you've drawn your slightly better token. Or you can use it as a repeatable card draw if you want to pull the good tokens out and test with a more intense bag. Either way, great in Silas. Fantastic. It's graduated to the level of like alternate signature card in my estimation.
For sure.
However,
he's even on the card.
He is even on the card. It's like it's made for him. I would posit that Unrelenting is a thing that you should look at in just about anyone who can take it. Because, again, talking about when you commit a skill card or a card to a test, talking about how many tokens from the bag does that knock out, right? To make me hit this test. So, the math gets weird depending on the scenario, but with Unrelenting, if you're intent on passing the test, it knocks out as many tokens as a wild icon plus 3. So it's automatically knocking out 3 tokens from the chaos bag, and then whatever +1 to your skill value gets you. And, you know, for a lot of cards that you commit, like knocking presumably four or more tokens out of the bag is a pretty good commit to get to that test. And on top of that ability to help you, like, either pull the bad tokens out in a clutch test to help you pass it, you have the option, if you're doing okay and you might need to draw some cards, you can just take a throwaway test, pull out the good tokens, and just draw 2 cards off of it instead. Like, I understand why people have the Silas blinders on when it comes to Unrelenting. Oh, Ian, what was your hip shot review? We're really bad at this.
Oh. And Silas, like a 10.
Yeah.
Outside Silas, like a 4.
Okay.
Maybe?
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I understand why people have the Silas blinders on. It's, like you said, just amazing. It's a 10. But I do think that even without that ability to recur it, it is a pretty good skill card for a single XP.
Oh yeah, and Teacup is mentioning in chat Amanda Sharp. That is another place where I've used Unrelenting Amanda. It's a great Amanda card for sure. Yeah.
Is it practice?
So that would... It is practice.
That's wonderful. Go Amanda. I haven't used it there personally, but that's a great pull.
Yeah. Yeah, I see where I think you've taken me there on your journey. I think what holds down this card outside of Silas in terms of how people look at it, including myself, I think there's a psychological thing whenever there's a card that's so clearly fit for one investigator. It kind of makes you like tunnel vision on that investigator and not really think about how others can use it. Because when it's like so fit for one investigator, they just like get so much out of it. And then when you think about another investigator, it's like, but it's not as awesome. But that doesn't mean it's not awesome. It's just not as awesome as this like 10 out of 10 thing, which isn't really a fair metric, but that's just how we tend to like look at cards and other things in life, I suppose. And then the other thing against it is I think it's just one of those things where because it's a skill and it's like, oh, we're just taking out these tokens just for this test. Like, is it really worth it? But I mean, when you think about what skills are doing, they are just doing it for that one test in general. But the fact it's taking these tokens out just make it more impactful than just that one wild icon. I mean, I guess it just gets back to what we were talking about with the bag manipulation thing, because it doesn't have like 4 wild icons or something printed on it or other icons. It just makes it a little bit harder for our brains to parse, like, how exactly is this helping us?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Teacup points out in chat with Bless in particular, it's a great way to leverage your Bless icons. Like if you're assuming you're doing well, again, when you need to pass a test, you can always use it to pull those bad tokens out and just knock several tokens out of the bag. But if you're doing fine and you really don't need that kind of help, suddenly this becomes a +1 wild icon, draw 2 cards. And you just you pull 3 blesses out, and you're still working with a fine bag.
Yeah, for sure. And there's certain like treacheries or cards out there that like trigger if you draw certain tokens on them, so you can counter those. Like I'm thinking about some treacheries where it's like, if you draw this token, it's an auto fail instead. So that's another place. But I think more just in general, like, one is you're just helping the overall probability, but then it's also, again, similar to what we talked about with Chthonian Stone, there are certain of the bad stone token effects that you might just want to avoid completely.
Yeah.
Not have to worry about it.
And like, yeah. Just look at it. It's a cool little card, and it gives options based on your situation. And I think that is possibly an element of cards in general that goes undervalued, in my personal opinion, is that like some cards will have maybe lukewarm reception or maybe mediocre effects, but several different options as to how you actually use it, and that becomes a lot better.
Huh, it's any 3 chaos tokens, huh? So you could pull out 3 frost tokens if you wanted, for example.
Oh, yeah, you could. Look at
I
that.
didn't even think about that. Yeah, an Edge of the Earth.
Unrelenting in edge.
Yeah. Silas doesn't worry about the cold. He just walks through the snow with no shirt on. It's fine.
Shirtless. He's Van Damming between 2 dog sledges.
Yeah, he is.
Silas is my boyfriend. You step off.
Silas is everyone's boyfriend, to be fair.
All right, what you got?
All right, I'll jump over to Rogue for this one.
And also, I should point out that on top of everything that we have been intermittently failing to do, we should probably read the full card as we introduce these. So I'm sorry, everyone who had to look up the ones that we've done so far. We'll get good at this podcasting thing eventually.
Yeah, eventually. No promises. This is taking it way back to the core set. There's probably a good chance I've named this card on a past underrated cards episode, but what are you gonna do?
Core set? What are you about to drop here?
Some things don't change. A card that in the early days of the game, I once described as my favorite card in the game, but I'm really rating this as underrated because I stopped playing this at a certain time in the game. But I think it's worth taking another look at. And that is our old friend Cat Burglar. Level 1 rogue assets. You get +1 agility. It's at ally, obviously. Action, exhaust Cat Burglar. Disengage from each enemy engaged with you and move to connecting location. This action does not provoke attacks of opportunity. 2 and 2.
4.5 to a 5. Although I have to say, in my recent days putting rogue decks together, I've sideways glanced at him a couple times. But I still have not. I don't think I've included him in a deck since core set. So I have to rate him somewhat more lowly.
Yeah, sure. And like I mentioned, I myself have. It's been a while. I swore by him in the early days of the game. I think what has pulled against him is just because Rogue has gotten some amazing upgraded XP allies like Lola and Janae that are just bonkers out of this world. But the reason I think Cat Burglar is still worth a look is one, it's only 1 XP, so very reasonable. You get the passive boost, but just that action is the ultimate get out of jail card, which you disengage from every single enemy engaged with you and just straight up move to another location. And there's just when I just think about the many times in my Abandoned and Alone solo series where I've gotten trapped with a bunch of enemies and have to figure out how to get away from them. A single action with Cat Burglar, done. That's it. You don't have to take a test is the huge thing, because I've had plays where it's let me evade this enemy and throw down a nimble and then we'll get out of here. Auto fail. Anything that's just testless just gets you out of trouble. And again, it depends on player count and what kind of investigator you're using in play style. But when I'm specifically thinking solo games and games where you're evading a lot of enemies, the evade style works really well when you're able to keep the number of enemies at your location manageable. But if you auto fail a test or the encounter deck starts spamming out enemies on you, once you start getting to 2 or 3 or whatever enemies that you're starting to get more enemies you need to evade, then you have actions to evade them and get away. That's when someone like Cat Burglar is okay, escape button on tap at all times.
I have many thoughts. First, to add to your description of those particular types of moments in games, the TFA game that I talked about last episode that I've been playing in this campaign that I just recently started with my friend Kip. The second time we ran through the Forbidden Wilds, Uncharted Wilds. I just did this recently, and now I've already forgotten the name of the scenario. But anyway, the first scenario in TFA, I kept track because it felt ridiculous. But between bad luck and encounter deck reshuffles, we drew at least one enemy in 2-player every single Mythos phase.
Mm-hmm.
And yet somehow between 2 plays of the, I think it's Forbidden Wilds, I'll just commit to it. Between 2 plays of the Forbidden Wilds, we never saw the Boa Constrictor. People who want to talk probabilities, that's cute, but like real randomness sometimes feel very unfucking random. Like it feels very deliberately mean sometimes. But there are those moments that comes together for the encounter deck, and even a well-constructed deck, there's just only so much you can do. And yeah, Cat Burglar in that case is an extremely effective reset button for those little moments where you're just like, I just need one moment to breathe. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally just I need the room to breathe.
Oh, Grajon says Untamed Wilds. It's Untamed Wilds.
Yeah.
That's thank you.
They are both forbidden and untamed.
So I agree with you. Like, really good release valve. Like, possibly even good to just get the 2 things done. Disengage from an enemy, move. Great action compression. How much do you think a solo mindset plays into one's valuation of this card? Because I look at this as primarily a multiplayer person, and I go, yeah, well, it really only solves the problem for you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's all that really matters, right?
Fucking rogue. But I mean, that is an important difference, I think, is that in solo, you don't have to even ask that question. So, like, suddenly it's all upside. But I think in multiplayer, the value does diminish a bit.
It factors in a lot. I mean, I think this is primarily a solo play. Maybe 2 players, but more so solo. For those exact reasons. And in multiplayer too, in general, like if you get into those type of situations, like with a bunch of enemies, like you have a whole team to like get each other out of it. Whereas Cat Burglar is more like, okay, I have no other way to get out of this. Like that's the ultimate panic button. So yeah, I think it's mostly a true solo play, which kind of goes along with the theme of the whole Cat Burglar in the first place. But
it's true. They don't generally rove in packs, do they?
Yeah. Rove packs of cat burglars.
It's a heist of burglars. That's what we call a group of cat burglars.
Yes, it's a heist. And I also think it's kind of, maybe not always, but it's largely might be a charisma play too, that like Cat Burglar might not be your primary ally.
Like your off ally. Your offhand ally.
The good old offhand ally. As I mentioned, there are some amazing allies in Rogue at the upgraded levels especially, so you might have maybe Cat Burglars not fulfilling all your ally needs, but it is like kind of your offhand ally to be your panic button. Expensive, 4, but you know, allies tend to be in Rogue has the means to pay for multiple allies often, so
cheap on the XP front though.
Yes,
as cheap as you could hope. So
yep,
it's got that going for it. Mm-hmm. How many level 0 agility boosting Rogue allies are there?
Level 0?
Are there any?
I don't think so. The level 0 of Rogue allies is pretty bare bones.
It's pretty bare bones for like stat boosts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Leo DeLuca, which is no. Joey the Rat, no. Gregory Greed, no.
No, not Dario, not Henry.
Dario, yes, but only if you... I mean, that gives you stat boosts, but only if you...
Right, but not agility.
Resources. Yeah, but not agility. Who am I forgetting? Is that... Oh, Lonnie. Oh, Lonnie gives you a combat boost, but not an agility boost.
And
yeah,
so is Lonnie the only static rogue level 0 boost without a condition? That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're...
it's amazing you guys are able to function. Good job.
There's a big jump between level 0 rogue allies and upgraded.
There really is.
Potentially the biggest of any class. Yeah.
Oh man, I don't disagree. I mean, also you guys have Henry Wan, so that weighs the average down by a decent amount.
Oh yeah, of course I forgot about Henry.
No one want to play him.
Henry. Yeah, poor Henry.
I like when you first started describing your first card, I thought you were gonna open this goddamn segment with Henry Wan, and I was ready to be here for it, but I was also scared about where we were gonna go. So
one day,
I'm glad you went with
Henry's
Alice.
Time will come. It'll probably be when Henry gets one of those helpful taboos that cards get every now and then.
All right, well, my next card, now this isn't one that I'm necessarily saying is the bomb, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone else play this card since it released. It was an Edge of the Earth. This is, for me, a very, very consummate example of a phenomenon that I like to include in my Arkham decks. Might not be like the most efficient thing. I know people who might power game or maximize deck lists might not disagree with this particular theory. But I think a deck is vastly improved by a cheeky one-of. And Arkham gives you decent space to do it, in my personal opinion, with the tight deck numbered, 30-ish card deck with 2 copies max in most cases. Like, just I think the hypergeometrics work so well for a cheeky one-of in Arkham. So this is one of my favorite cheeky one-ofs in just about any deck that can take it since it came out, because it doesn't always happen, but there's always a use for this card. And it is Ethereal Slip. And I'll just start with level 0, but everything I say about level 0 will obviously apply to the level 2 version. So Ian, your hip shot.
I'll give Ethereal Slip, I'll say like a 7.
Okay,
I'm
so you're higher
pretty
on
hot
that
on
one.
Ethereal Slip, yeah.
Okay. So you're okay. So the top review is basically saying exactly what I'm hoping to say. All right, I'm not going to read it so I don't plagiarize. So anyway, Ethereal Slip is a level 0 multi-class card. It is Rogue and Mystic. It is a 2-cost event. It has an willpower and an agility icon, spell and trick traded. Choose a non-elite enemy at a revealed location up to 2 connections away. Swap places with that enemy. So, like I said, this isn't necessarily the sort of card that gets played every game it appears. But there's usually, in most games that I've played of Arkham Horror, the card game, at least since this came out and I started paying attention, there's usually at least one moment in the game where this is a great card. And if you have it in your hand in that moment, it feels so goddamn good. So you get potentially move actions out of it. You can swap places with an enemy who's sitting on a place where you want to go. And you also don't have to deal with that enemy for now, maybe. So you might look at this and go, okay, up to 2 connections away. That's a little bit of a limitation. Yeah, possibly, but like, if you look at any given Arkham map, except for the very, very biggest ones, most locations are 2 connections away. Like, getting to 3 or 4 connections away is usually like stretching corners of the map. So it happens, but 2 connections away generally leads to more places on the map than you would think just looking at the text.
Yep.
The other thing is that you can get really tricky with this shit in multiplayer. You can get really tricky with this shit in multiplayer. If someone is engaged with an enemy that they don't want to be engaged with, and there's not like an easy solution to get there, if like the Guardian's like a location away and they have to like move through a treachery and then engage, and like it's, you know, there are those turns where even in a well balanced team, there's not a good solution. There's not a good solution to go take care of that enemy. Suddenly, you can choose that enemy and swap places with it. You're now with your ally. They don't have to deal with the enemy, and the enemy's, you know, at least one, possibly two locations away from you. Like, again, you have to be very, very conscious of the board. And it doesn't happen every game. But there's usually a point in this game where, like, you open that turn and you're like, oh, the position is right. This is a good card. I'm glad I have this. And in the occasional game where that's not the case, this has a willpower icon. Your Honor, I rest my case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those reasons are why I rated it fairly high. It's one of those cards where you do have games where you just don't use it, and that might like push you into a place where you're like, maybe I should just cut this. But then when you get those times where it enables these amazing shenanigans, especially in multiplayer, it's worth it.
Yeah, dude, I live and die for the flashy shit. Like, we really should start talking about the Arkham archetypes that they talked about and published on kind of the FFG side, because I thought they were really well constructed for what Arkham is. I'm a Slayer. I live for that moment where I'm like, hey, wait, I got the perfect fucking thing. Watch this.
Yeah, and Ethereal Slip has those moments where you're like, does this let me do what I want to do? And then oftentimes the answer is yes. And yeah, because it's doing so much at once, like it's really able to do a lot of things that other cards can do, because it's almost like combining 2 or 3 different cards together. It's letting you move, but it's also potentially letting you disengage an enemy. So it's
Ian,
doing a few different things at once.
You want me to lay like the biggest like I mean, it's a narrow use, but it's amazing. Like one of my favorite combos for this.
Hit me.
Luke Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
If you play this from the party box, you can pretend to be at any location. Sorry, that's sexy to me. Maybe that's my fetish. I don't know.
Yeah. Is that where Luke just falls through the world and like you have to restart your game?
He clips through the environment.
Yeah, I think that's the point where that happens. Oh, Luke things. Yeah,
being able to just like dump an enemy at any location from the like, I don't know, it's really good.
And then, I mean, you have everything from those crazy shenanigans to as simple as like you want to get to from point A to point B, but there's an enemy between you.
Yeah.
Suddenly you swap places. Like, think of how many actions you saved, because otherwise you would have had to move into that enemy's location, probably fight or evade them, hope you have enough actions, and you have to take tests along the way, right? To fight or evade them or whatever you're doing, and then move past them to the next location. Like with this, you just straight up swap places. They're now behind you, and you can just carry on your merry way, and you don't have to take a single test.
Yeah.
So,
and
that's pretty huge.
I mean, you're just playing leapfrog with the enemy, basically. Like it's so fun. You so we've been, you know, I come at this from the multiplayer angle, but like talking from the solo angle, particularly the solo angle where evading is kind of a primary means of enemy management, as many solo builds, you know, use. In that case, you're generally kind of leaving a larger amount of enemies on the board at any given time, because you're not killing them, you're evading them. So like suddenly board positioning becomes this game. And I think this card, its best use is an evadey build in solo.
Mm.
Because it just, you have so much more control over the board state, and you don't have to worry about like abandoning someone else with an enemy if that's what the positioning currently is, which is a thing you have to think about in multiplayer.
Yeah. Very true.
So, and then, yeah, like I said, anything I would say about level 0 applies to level 2. You gain an agility icon, you reduce the cost to 1, and it works with any revealed location. So just so good. So good. And I'll just throw this one on as the cherry on top. That is some baller ass art of Dexter, right? Like this is really real. Like this is the Mystic art that I live for.
Agreed.
All right, I'll stop gushing. What's your next card?
From an oldie to more of a newie. These are cards that
Was he the lost DuckTales cousin?
Yeah. Yes, we don't talk about those episodes. These are cards that came out, and again, maybe everyone out there is playing them and I just don't know about it. But I feel like because of the particular expansion they came out in, I myself haven't used this suite of cards a lot. And in the process of like looking at underrated cards, I'm like, I need to start using this one in particular more. And this one is from the Guardian class. This is one of the new tarot cards that came out and returned to the Circle Undone. And I think because not everyone got the returns, and so it's not like one of the regular releases, maybe that's part of why it doesn't get quite as much attention. So this one is the Star. It's the new Guardian Tarot.
17.
Star 17. I'll just read it out and then you can give your review. So this is a 3 cost, level 3. Each asset, it takes up tarot slot, obviously. Each asset you control with health gets +1 health. Each asset you control with sanity gets +1 sanity. And similar to all tarots, if it's in your opening hand when the game starts, you put it into play.
I'm at like a solid 7 on the Star.
Okay.
I do feel like I don't see it in many builds, though.
Yeah, I think all of the new tarots are kind of interesting, but this one especially. Like, obviously, it has to be in the right deck, but boosting the health and sanity, it's not just each ally you control, it's each asset you control. So there's... Obviously, there are the allies in Guardian, so that use their damage as a kind of... they kind of spend their damage to trigger their effect. Like, if you think about Guard Dog or Beat Cop, they're kind of taking a damage to do something. Or agency backup, for that matter. So... one thing the Star is doing is giving you extra uses out of those, and those cards tend to be pretty strong because it's just like Tesla's damage. So that's off the bat, and that's also in addition to it's giving you more soak out of those. But even if you move beyond the allies, then you think about other assets that you might have, even if it's not in Guardian, but if you have stuff from other classes that are like soaks, like your leather coats or cherished keepsakes, even like a fine clothes, you can actually put like damage or horror on fine clothes without discarding it right away. Yeah, so if you have the kind of deck that's using a lot of those kind of assets, and then we have, I can't remember all their names, but there's quite a few cards we got in Guardian where they're not like actual items, but you just dump like damage or horror onto them. I think Something Worth Fighting For is one of those. So
yep, and True Grit.
That's the other one. Yeah. So, and
How about
I'm sure there's
composures. Like even the level,
Yeah.
like you could take combat training, and that increases that. But even if you have access to an off-class one, suddenly that becomes a 2 health or sanity thing. That's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so there's so many assets now that have health or sanity on them, even beyond allies. So yeah, you could run this in like a ally focused deck, like a Leo obviously, or a Tommy. And that would be very good. But even beyond that, if you just have a fair amount of assets that let you put damage or horror onto them, like the star is giving you a lot of value for what it's doing. Like, and yeah, I think one of the things that goes against the tarots is sometimes people just think about it in terms of like, well, if it's not in my opening hand, it's just a dead card. But I mean, I think I would pay for the amount of value as this is doing. I think I would be fine paying 3 in an action to get it out there, because it's just the amount of value it's giving is probably worth it. Again, depending on the deck you're running and how many assets you have that can benefit from this. And if you do get it for free, whew, you're in business.
Well, there's a few reasons that, particularly in Guardian, you would want extra health or sanity. You've got, first, the stuff that uses its health and sanity as a resource, like Guard Dog or Greta. And then shifting to the multiplayer mindset, playing those cards where you can place damage or horror dealt to anyone at your location to those cards, like Tetsuo or Brother X, or Giddish. Like suddenly all of those cards get boosted by this. And then on top of that, you've got someone like Tommy Muldoon, who does extra stuff for extra health and sanity. So it's pretty great.
Yeah.
Do you okay, so here I have generally gone in the realm of the tarot cards a few different ways. Where ultimately I have landed is that I will put a single tarot card in my deck. That I know that means I'm less likely to draw it in the upkeep, in my starting hand. However, I have had decks where I put 2 of a single tarot card in, and when I draw the second one, it's just as big a bummer as drawing the first tarot card in my opening hand was a boon. Bummers and boons. That's the continuum we're working on.
Yeah, that's generally where I'm at. And especially for the star, you're talking about 3 XP, like 3 XP in 1 copy. That's about where I want to live, probably. I don't know if I want to pay 6 XP and then, draw that second copy. That's just like a big buzzkill. But yeah.
I would honestly be interested, and y'all, if anyone wants to call into the Mythos Busters hotline with the answer to this particular question, I'm kind of curious. When you look at an upgraded card, are you more thinking of it in terms of, okay, I'm going to take a full playset of this, so it costs twice its XP, or do people more generally think about an upgraded card of, oh, I would take one of this, and then if I want another one, like, do you kind of think of them as a set, or do you think of them as single purchases? Where are you at with that? I don't know where I'm at with that. I think it depends on the card a little bit, but
yeah, for sure depends on the card. Like, is it something that I'm going to need the 2 copies or not?
I think I'm more often in the camp of grabbing the play set of a thing, but sometimes there are cards where I only want 1.
I think definitely in terms of evaluating it, I tend to just like automatically multiply it by 2 in my mind and be like, this is actually like a 6 XP card, like in this example, because I'm going to take 2. Although in this case, like we talked about, I'd probably take 1. But yeah, I think I just default to that's how I think about it.
Okay, but like, yeah, okay, so that's where you're at in general, yeah. All right. I'd be interested if anyone else has a different perspective on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that to me?
Mm-hmm.
That's to me. All right. Well, I gave the game away on this one too, so maybe I'll skip that one for later. Let's talk about one of my probably. I feel like this is maybe a card that is one of the most underrated cards on my list, and that is Gravedigger's Shovel. So, you have the zero. I'm more talking from the multiplayer perspective, of course, because that's primarily who I represent. I am mostly talking about the level 2 version of Gravedigger's Shovel.
Okay.
But many of the things that I will argue for apply to the OG as well. So Gravedigger's Shovel is a level 0 survivor asset, 2 cost, 1 combat icon, item, tool, weapon, and melee traded. It has so many. Action, fight. You get +2 combat for this attack. Action, discard Gravedigger's Shovel, discard 1 clue at your location. Okay, so I think that the versatility of being able to fight with a combat boost is notable, and that's nice. But the primary reason I like Gravedigger's Shovel so much is its clue discovery ability. So we've all long agreed that testless clues are pretty great. So for level 0 Gravedigger's Shovel, I'm going to go ahead and say that the ability to just have this around, and you don't even necessarily have to have played it in advance. You can like hit a location where you have that occasional location that stops you up, where you go like, oh God, all right, we're like 4 shroud on this one. Wasn't ready yet. What am I going to do? And like some locations will just stop you up like that, right? So that's ideally where your testless clues come in. And I feel like Gravedigger's Shovel for a 2-cost card is a great little solution to those little conundrums. Shifting that to version 2, people would like, again, testless 2 clues. All right, so anyway, level 2 you get a -1 cost, so it's only 1 cost, an extra combat icon. And then the discard action is you may discover 1 clue, or you can remove Gravedigger's Shovel from the game to gain 2 clues instead. And like that ability is fantastic. 2 testless clues for a 1-cost card. Toss in any ability where you're able to play this without playing an action, like Bob, like Yorick, like any deck that's playing scavenging. And suddenly you have the ability in a scenario to just bang, 1 action, 2 clues, and you bounce. And like, it's not like it exiles, it just removes from the game. Were you really going to use it again? Were you going to find, like, maybe you're a survivor. Maybe you would have. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't get too spicy about that one. But I do think that the hand slot is not nothing. So you do have to kind of build your kit such that it can bear the extra hand slot. But at level 2, 1 cost, 1 action, 2 clues, testless. Oh man, I really think this card should be in more decks. I didn't give you time to do your hip shot. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at this. I get so impassioned.
That's fine. I think my hip shot would have been around a 4-ish, which I think goes along with your feeling that it's underrated. I did definitely like it when it first came out, and I don't dislike it. I think I have a hang up about like the action cost. Like I gotta spend an action to get it out, and then do an action to get a clue. It's like double action for a clue. But I definitely see what you're saying. I think the places that I've really liked it are where I can get it out and save an action.
And that's like, a fair argument.
Like when I was doing my my famous / infamous Preston Joey the Rat build, Like I would have Joey the Rat like dump Gravedigger Shovel into play for free, like free action, not free in terms of cost. But Preston doesn't care about cost, and then you're really just talking about an action to get a clue, which is like exactly where you want to be for Preston Tesla. So yeah, any of the, and there are quite a few ways, to get it into play for. Without spending that action. So I think those plays. So I guess the question really comes down to, would I use it when you need to spend the action? I don't know. It depends. And yeah, maybe that's like the heavy true solo player in me, where it's like, I'm so pressed for actions. Whereas in multiplayer, it's definitely more feasible to be like, yeah, I'll spend an action to put out the shovel now, and then spend an action later when I need to get the clues off.
I actually really like how we're bringing this dual perspective to the table here, because I understand solo theory, but I'm not terribly practiced, and I know you have a lot more time in the game solo than you do multiplayer. Put your multiplayer hat on for a minute. Like, I know you were in the process of doing that, but I want you to do it harder.
See if I can squeeze my head in there. Yes, but also even potentially in solo, one of the things you have to think about is there are at least one or a couple locations in every scenario that are a little bit of a pickle in terms of getting clues off. Unless you're like a uber investigator, in terms of like having a super high intellect and you're just built for that. But for most investigators and solo and just in general, there's going to be a couple locations that are just, whether it's because their shroud is super high or because they have some dumb effect on it that like makes it hard to investigate or punishes you if you fail or whatever. And that's where like Teslas grabs like Gravedigger Shovel really come in. Because what else are you talking about in Survivor in terms of Tesla's clues? What else is there?
I mean, there's not much. There's burn after reading.
Which
requires you to exile, and I assume in most cases effectively spend XP.
Yeah, you're exiling 2 cards, right? Burn after reading itself plus another card.
Yes. Well, I mean, you exile burn after reading if you want to remove the doom, but you don't have to exile it to get the clues.
That's okay. That's right.
If I'm remembering that card correctly, I have used it one time. There's I just had it in my head. I'll get there again. There's not much though. There's not much.
Yeah, so I think in that respect, it definitely has like a place.
It's in your hand, Ian. It takes up 1 hand slot.
It does take up 1 hand slot.
Yes. Okay. Discord username. Thank you. The mysterious Raven is a Tesla survivor clue.
Yeah.
But I feel like that has a bigger cost than 1 resource and an action.
Yeah.
Because that makes you take a horror, right?
Yeah.
I really wanted the Raven. Sorry, quick aside on the Raven. I really originally read the Raven to place 1 damage or place 1 horror on the Raven, discard it, and get a clue. I'm like, fuck, that's free. Great. No, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. Unless you're Tommy playing the Star. Then it might.
Yes. Good old Star. The old standby. Yeah, I do like the upgraded Gravedigger Shovel for sure, though, when you're doing 1 cost for 2 clues. If you remove it from the game, which you're probably going to do that option.
I just feel like if there was a 1 cost event that said as an additional cost to play this event, spend an action, remove this event from the game, discover 2 clues. I feel like that event would get played. So add on to that you cost a hand slot, which I understand is not nothing, and you have Gravedigger's Shovel.
Yeah, it just all comes down to how much do you value Tesla's clues, which like, let's say you're spending 2 actions to get 1 clue, but it's guaranteed, versus let's take 2 tests and try to get that clue. You know, yeah, it just really comes down to, it depends on the situation and what the location is. And but I mean, for similar reasons, I usually include intel report in most rogue decks, which is just 1 action. Same. So it's much cheaper in terms of actions, but it's more expensive in terms of resources. Like, let's say you want 2 clues off of it, then you're talking about 4 resources, versus this upgraded Gravedigger Shovel, which is 1. So
yeah, and
spending
then
more
XP into the mix too, so the currency gets murky.
Yeah, so it's definitely murky, but I guess the point is, like, it's very cheap in terms of resources, which is kind of Survivor's thing, but you're paying actions to do it. So yeah, it's an interesting comparison.
All right, Ian, why don't you bring us home with your last one?
Ooh, now I gotta choose the last one to do.
Hey, remember when we were worried that we wouldn't have enough to talk about on this episode? And then we're like, oh wait,
I don't know
we're
why
Mythos
we always
Busters.
say
We
that.
can talk about weird nothing Arkham theory for 90 minutes at this point.
Okay, I'm gonna do this one last, and I don't think I'm gonna get much pushback from you, but I still think it's worth talking about, because I think this one is really prompted by some of our experiences in Iron Man, which you'll be familiar with.
I do love multiplayer Iron Man, yes.
And again, maybe this is a card that everyone loves, and it's gonna be crazy for me to say it's underrated, but this is a card that I feel like is so essential, especially in multiplayer, not just Iron Man, but in big multiplayer games, that I feel like it should be shouted from the rooftops more. And this is a purple card called Time Warp.
9 out of 10.
Not surprised.
11 out of 10 would warp again.
1 cost, level 2, fast. Play immediate. This is a Mystic event. Play immediately after an investigator at your location finishes resolving an action during his or her turn. Undo that action. Return the game state to exactly the way it was before that action was performed, including that action's cost. The only Control Z card in the game.
And oh boy,
to just straight up undo an action.
Have you ever gone, or maybe you were listening at the time, listened to Drawn to the Flames? Sorry, I just said their actual name. Damn, I broke the joke. Have you ever listened to Drawn to the Flames episode on Time Warp?
I have not, no.
They talk about Time Warp for a very long time. And still didn't cover a fraction of the questions and weird vagaries that card would bring to bear.
I do remember when this card was first. I don't remember exactly how it was first spoiled or in what way, or maybe when it just came out, but yeah, there were lots of questions, and I'm sure there still are, because the idea of just undo that action. I remember there was even a little debate of should a card like this exist, and as I am often on the side of in cases, I'm like, yes, I like the weird stuff.
I mean, it doesn't break anything. It's one action.
It's more just the kind of weirdness of undoing certain actions and what does it mean to change the game state back.
It's like having that one up on that level that you were almost dead on, and you draw the one up. Yeah,
I mean, most of the
Video
time,
games
and
still have that, right?
I think pretty much every time we've used it in Iron Man, and the way I think it's used most of the time is just okay, messed up that test. Let's rewind it and do it again.
It's basically one of those tests that we were banking a lot on this.
Yeah.
And it happens in every campaign, some big critical test that the entire thing hinges on. That's when the -5 or the tentacle shows up. And oh man, those are the moments where you're glad you have Time Warp.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you just Again, Time Warp might be a card where you don't use it in every scenario. But man, like the value of cards that save like however many hours you poured into a campaign, to know that you have that Time Warp in hand for that crucial test, which like the success of your campaign might hinge on that.
Yep.
Is, I mean, how do you even put a value on that? It's just,
well,
in the times where we've been like, oh, does anyone have Time Warp in hand? No.
Sorry guys, I've failed you.
Yeah, yes. So yeah, big fan.
I mean, yes, no, absolutely no pushback. Please push harder. I have championed this card forever, and I feel like one of the reasons that maybe we don't see it as much or hear it talked about as much is that you kind of have to abstract its value more so than most cards. Most cards, you read the text, you see exactly what it does, and you decide whether you like it or not. Time Warp is so unbelievably contextual. Like, to even ascertain the value of it, you have to have played, first of all, I think, a bunch of Arkham Horror, the card game, so that you understand the value of rewinding a single action at some point in the game, which most games will have at least one of those moments.
Yes.
And then on top of that, have enough experience behind you to be like, oh man, I could point to this one failure point in this one campaign that I played, and if I had had Time Warp in that moment, we would have won. And then you play it, and you get to see all of that actually come true. When you, let me tell you guys, I play a lot of multiplayer, and I exist at the intersection of wanting to be like support, I'm here to help player, and holy shit, watch this badass shit I'm about to do player. And Time Warp sits neatly at the nexus of those two things, where it's like Scott pulls the tentacle that one moment where he thought he was going to get like 6 clues off the location. We were going to end the scenario this turn, and he fails because it's the auto fail, and there's nothing you can do about it. There is no cooler support moment to be the dude who's holding Time Warp right then. Let me tell you. Be like, take that again, bitch. Go.
Yeah.
Go off, King.
And 100% agree. And I think even though like the let's rewind and do that test again is like the bread and butter of this card, I think there are other uses that are underrated and worth exploring too. Like there's quite a few scenarios where it's like random locations that are all the same, and you gotta find the right one, or one's worse than the other. So you could go to one of those, oh, that's not the right one, Time Warp back, and then go the other way. And sometimes that's really important. Or it could be something as simple as like, oh, someone's gonna like draw their deck, and they draw a horrible weakness at the wrong time. Well, let's undo that and figure out a different way to do what we're doing. So I think there's different ways to use Time Warp beyond that are like even myself, who is holding this up as a card to look at more. Like I think there's lots of uses for Time Warp that are relatively untouched.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just think the hardest part of Time Warp, or at least the hardest part of getting to love Time Warp, is being able to abstract like those moments where it would be cool to have it. And it's very much like Mystic Lucky, where like, you know how when you're a survivor and you have lucky in your hand, you can just play the game by taking riskier tests than you would normally do. You can just take tests that you would never take if you didn't have lucky in your hand.
Yeah.
And in the same way, when you have Time Warp in your hand, you can just kind of like go a little bit more aggro because you've got a button should you need it.
Yes.
And I do love aggro. It's
Yeah. It's nice having that cushion to fall back on.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, what's your last one?
No, I mean, so one last word on Time Warp. particularly hilarious on Diana Esperance. That is all.
Ooh, yeah. Time Mage Esperance.
Yeah. She's just like, all right, just you guys fucking do whatever you want. Like, be reckless, please.
Yeah. It's the Doctor from Doctor Who. The Doctor Esperance is the Doctor.
That's right. Wibbly wobbly timey wimey. I watched that show religiously and hard all the way through Matt Smith. And then when Matt Smith's tenure ended, I like mourned for a while. And even though I've heard it's good and like I have every faith that every Doctor that's served since then has been fantastic, I have yet to watch another episode of Doctor Who.
I fell off after Capaldi left, and it wasn't because I had anything against the next Doctor, but it's just one of those things. Like, Doctor Who is very much a show when I'm watching it, like I'm all about it and I binge it. But when I have little breaks in between, which is what happened after Capaldi left, then sometimes it's hard for me to get back to it. And so that's pretty much what happened.
Shit, I should rewatch some Doctor Who.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's my takeaway from this conversation. My last card. All right, now I'm between two. Okay, so the only other card on my list that I'm not going to talk about was Crystalline Elder Sign. I'm actually fairly certain the last time we did this episode, I talked about Crystalline Elder Sign.
It's likely.
It seems likely. I think people greatly overestimate the effect on the game sealing the +1 token has, which to my mind is almost none. Almost none effect does that have. And for that cost, you get to supercharge one of your investigators, and particularly in Mystic with some of the like willpower and then off stat mystics, like that can be absolutely huge. Like taking Diana from a 6/3/3/3 to a 7/4/4/4.
Agreed.
It doth change the game. All right, well, that's my review of Crystalline Elder Sign. So the one I'm actually going to talk about, I don't necessarily think anyone hates on this card. I just feel like it's one of those cards where it like seems like a fine idea, but often gets looked over. And that is Jury Rig. Where you at on Jury Rig?
I'll say like a 5, right in the middle.
All right, that's like, it seems like a fine idea, but when you get to 33 cards, Jury Rig's looking pretty cuttable, isn't it? Most of the time, and that's where I think it exists for a lot of people. I have personally finally gotten through a couple of builds where I have kept Jury Rig in the 30, and I have been pleased at my choice. So I'll start with its strongest case.
Okay.
And that is in a Dark Horse deck. Because nowadays, your Dark Horse deck is probably going to lean into, I assume for the majority of Dark Horse decks, Survivor Dark Horse decks, they're probably going to lean into the Axe and the Compass, right?
Yep.
To be able to just kind of sit there 100%. And like maybe gain one resource and use it as a boost on one of them, whatever you're doing that turn, like just be able to ride at 0 resources and still get acceleration out of it. Like that's a really juicy deck. In that deck, Jury Rig is a phenomenal card. Let's read Jury Rig first of all. So Jury Rig is a level 0 survivor event. It costs 0. It has an intellect and a combat icon. It is an upgrade. It has 3 durability uses. Attached to an item asset controlled by an investigator at your location. First of all, point out, multiplayer accessible. Free triggered ability during a skill test on attached asset. Spend 1 durability. You get +2 skill value for this test. So you get 3 +2s while doing tests on that asset. So, like I was saying, in that Dark Horse build, this is a great card because A, you get to put it on one of those assets that ideally you're sitting on, whether it's one that you did pay for before you went Dark Horse, or whether it's your axe or your compass. Doesn't matter. This is a 0-cost card. You can play it from Dark Horse mode.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to do that thing that you do in Dark Horse decks where you're like, oh shit, I have a card I need to play. I guess I need to go off Dark Horse for a couple. Like, you don't need to go off the wagon. You can play it.
You gotta go off Dark Horse.
You can play it from Dark Horse mode onto the thing that you're using, and suddenly give yourself the option, because you'll be doing fine for like half the scenario, but then you hit that one enemy that's got like 4 or 5 fight, or that location that's got like 4 or 5 shroud, and suddenly you're like, ugh.
Mm-hmm.
And Jury Rig, for the cost of an action and a card, solves that problem, or it helps with that problem, let's say, 3 times per game.
Mm-hmm.
So Dark Horse build, I think, is its strongest showing. But even beyond that, I think in the multiplayer mindset, the ability to play this on someone else's asset, like, that's good. Like, if you're sitting across the table from someone who's playing Survivor and they're just like, all right, well, I don't really need to investigate. Let me just put Jury Rigged on your whatever.
Mm-hmm.
One cost, it's like one action, 0 cost. You get 3 +2s on this thing. Like, that's just a good card. It's got good flexibility. You can decide to put it where you want it. There's an ever-increasing amount of items that have skill tests on them as the card pool grows. I just think this card's great.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, Discord username said I just read the top Arkham DB review, and Shining Trapezahedron. Oh no. Trapezahedron. That one took me a second. We got there. But that's the one where you can basically skip the cost of a mystic or of a spell by testing it instead. So to put this on the Zahedron and test at +2 on those tests is pretty juicy. Graduate Council's Coffer. Yes. That almost makes that card playable.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cards where I need to really take the time to like think about all the possible uses, because I think there's a way to just play it straight ahead, which is probably the more sane way, but I like thinking about some jankery that's possible.
I mean, even if you just play it straight ahead, like, you won't regret it. But then with jank, it only gets better.
Yeah. Like you said, it is flexible. It's funny, like, I feel like we've been talking about a lot of psychology in this episode, but
it's important.
It is funny. I mean, it plays into how we evaluate cards. Like, it's not just some straight ahead objective thing. Like, there's a lot of weird psychology that goes into how all of us evaluate cards.
Absolutely.
And the reason I bring that up here is because how different would we think about Jury Rig if instead it had the equivalent of, like, put Jury Rig into play and attach 3 unexpected courages to it, and you can commit those unexpected courages to tests that this asset is doing.
Yeah.
Like, for some reason, that changed. Like, it's essentially the same in most ways, but it just changes, like, how you think about the card. At least it does for me in a way. I'm like, that's actually pretty good. Like, because if you think about the slots we take up in our deck, or the actions and resources we do just to get those extra icons for certain tasks, like, that's essentially what Jury Rig is doing. But it's just an interesting way of going about it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's cool because it's an upgrade. There are things that combo with upgrades. If you're Tommy or if you're Yorick, this does really interesting things. But even on top of that, it's level 0, so you can, like, scrounge it. You can resourceful it. Both of which are things that are in my Dark Horse Silas deck, coming to an Innsmouth Conspiracy Iron Man near you. This might have been where I tested it the most. But yeah, I think the psychology of it is what's interesting. And maybe this is a more broad statement to make about any of these cards where you're like, I see it, but somehow it never makes it into my decks. Like, I have many cards like that. Do you have cards like that?
Yes.
Where
for
like
sure.
I like see a card and I like what it's doing, but then when I try to like work it into a deck idea, I tend to default to the cards that I know work in that deck archetype that are already established in my brain. I think is probably what my brain does. So what I would invite you to do with any of these cards that you like, you see and you want to try, put it in the deck and make it unimpeachable. Cut the cards you know first is what I've been doing, or what I've been trying to do, intermittently successfully. But that kind of cuts through the psychology for a lot of these things for me, is just be like, okay, just get it into a deck and get that deck onto a table and actually see it in action. And so many cards change their color once you actually get it onto the table. And like I think that drives a lot of, like you said, the psychology behind what I find to be underrated cards. Are cards that once I actually see it come to life, it leaves a much different impression upon me than it did before.
Yeah, for sure. And I think cards like this, part of what plays into that is it's an interesting like tempo decision. And if I keep saying tempo, I will summon Scott eventually. But
the tempo is different than pace.
But you're kind of sacrificing some immediate tempo by like getting this card out and kind of taking away from whatever investigating or fighting you were doing in the near term. But over the longer term, you might be actually helping yourself because you're probably succeeding on more tests than you would have otherwise, and you're saving actions that way and kind of propelling yourself forward. But sometimes it's hard to make that trade in the moment. It's a hard thing to learn, and really, even after many years of playing Arkham, of like, okay, I need to put time into this now, and I know I don't have much time, but it's gonna pay off later.
Yeah. It's almost like delayed gratification is one of the hardest human skills to develop. It's real hard. It's hard. I get it. We all struggle. It's fine.
Yep. We learned so many life lessons today, Sean.
We sure did, Daddy Ian. Tell us another one. At the time before the internet. Well, most of us looked at porn down by riverbeds somehow.
You're just looking at cave paintings on the wall.
Oh my god, that's more accurate than I want to commit to. Okay. So yes, thank you for joining us on this journey of underrated cards. We hope it was informative and interesting. I always like hearing. I just love hearing impassioned arguments, ever how they come and ever what they're about. So thank you for sharing your cards. If you guys have any underrated cards, please feel free and invited to call them into the Mythos Busters hotline at 203-693-4984. No, I got that wrong. It's 203-493-6984. There we go. 203-493-MYTH. And we'd love to hear it, like a nice, concise, impassioned argument as to why a card you think maybe people don't look at deserves a few wayward glances. Ian, let's move it into technical time. We promised last time that this would be the Snap update. I feel like you, sir. I can only see the bottoms of your feet for how far you've fallen in the hole. So tell me about your Snap experience.
Yes, my Snap experience. So I've been continuing to play Snap. It was funny because there were a period of like 2 days, maybe 3 days, where I was thinking to myself, is this it? Is this where I fall out of love with it? Because I wasn't playing it as much. Then I was right back in.
I was about to say, damn, you're fickle. Fondness oft make the heart grow stronger.
Yeah, after that couple of days, I was right back in it, and I was just as strong into it. So it was just a temporary blip. But yeah, I'm still finding it really engaging as I've moved beyond Pool 2, so I'm now in all the Pool 3 cards.
How do you know? How do you know when you cross that line?
There's a few ways. One, it's basically like collector level 500 and above, I think, is the threshold. But the other way is like...
For what, level 2 or level 3?
To get into level 3.
To get into level 3. Okay, so I just crossed 500 today.
Okay. And the other main way... The other main way you know is when you're like... making your way up the collector's chain, like instead of just getting cards automatically, now you get the collector's caches.
Okay.
So once you're in that space, then you're in the Pool 3.
Which, then how do you get new cards?
Yeah, so when you get a collector's cache, you get something random. It might be a new card, but it might also be gold. It might be credits. Or it might be these collector's tokens, which they just introduced.
Man, Ian, like, not to sound like an old fucking man, but join me in a moment in mourning and remembering the times before fucking ambiguous, obscured, obfuscated reward systems. Do you remember that time in gaming?
I do. I remember it well.
God, what a glorious time it was.
When you didn't need an advanced degree just to figure out how you get new stuff in the game.
Yeah. Where the thinking was done by what humans could put into coding and not algorithms.
Yeah, for all that I do enjoy Snap a lot, and I do think it's better in that respect than a lot of other games of a similar type, it does still have that element of like learning, like, and the only reason I know these systems now is because playing it so much. So if you're just casually into the game, like, I can only imagine what you think. But yeah, because you have to figure out like, what are these collector's tokens versus gold versus credits versus like, I'm leveling up a collector's level here, and then there's like the season rating that you're improving over time, and then there's your actual ranking. There's like so many different systems going on at once. So
it's almost meant to be inscrutable, doesn't it seem?
Which is funny, because if you just peel away all of that, like, the reason I stick with it is because I just enjoy playing the game. Like, all that left aside, like the actual gameplay is actually engaging to me, and that's why I enjoy it. And like figuring out the puzzle of each little mini game, and because of the short play times, that still remains a huge thing. So again, we'll see how long I stick with it, but for now, it's definitely something that I keep being engaged with, and finding new like the pool 3. As you get into Pool 3, I feel like the Pool 1 and Pool 2 cards, you obviously get some pieces for different combos, but they kind of fall into different archetypes. Like, you get your destroy decks and your discard deck pieces and so on, and then some just regular
currently
utility.
running a draw deck that has been seeing more success than any deck I've built up to this point. Because
is it with a Devil Dino?
Yeah, it is with Devil Dino and Moon Girl for sure. Collector,
Nice.
Cable,
Nice.
Mantis. I mean, I could just go through my list. It's only 12 cards, but
Yes.
and the reason for that
That's
is
the
because
nice
I'm
thing.
not smart enough to run a move deck well. And I don't think I have the right pool for a good like destroy deck. At least I haven't had like great luck with it. Maybe I'm not smart enough for that one either. But this draw deck I can do.
Yeah, it's funny finding the decks that you really like in Snap, and there are more deck types than I originally thought there was, which is part of why I'm enjoying it. But
Same. Yep.
Yeah,
I thought for sure, like in the early parts of the game, I was like, how complicated and wide can this get? Like, there aren't any synergies here. We're just placing power on locations.
Yeah, like It's just so funny that this is like the digital card game that grabbed me when so many haven't. When it was first, like, I've bounced off so many, like, they just don't tend to grab me. But when I first saw it announced, like, when it was first announced, I was like, okay, cool, Marvel card game. Like, that sounds like it's up my alley. But then when they're, like, super simple, 3-minute games, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a terrible, like, cash grab. Like, I'm never going to want to play this. So, the fact this is the one. But yeah, it's very simple, but it allows for, like, a fair bit of like, yeah, finding the synergies, finding the nuance, figuring out the puzzle of each game, and yeah, the pool 3 cards I feel like is where you're starting to get. I'm seeing some more weirder cards where you really have to think about, okay, how do I fit this in a deck? But yeah.
I think they just found, because there's this kind of, it's almost like a cost to benefit analysis. And it's like the amount of energy I want to invest in the deck and thinking about the deck and engaging with everything else versus like how much time I want to invest in the game. And like they found a really good balance with this. Like I have been where I'm at with this is I've been telling myself for like the past 2 weeks, like, okay, I subscribed for a season. I had a good time. They took my money. Like, when this becomes a thing that I can like sit on a Discord call with a friend and play the game live, I'm like, that's amazing. I'm going to be so excited because the ability to like put shitty cards on unpredictable locations is only going to make for like very fun over over a call type games. However, that's a different situation. And in how it exists now, I just keep telling myself like, okay, whenever I get bored of it, it's fine. I'm just going to let myself get bored of it. I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to be fine with that. I've not gotten there yet because I just feel like they've hit this balance of how much time you have to sink into like thinking about it and kind of like abstractly engaging with it versus how much time you actually spend playing it. And I think that this one has hit. This is the first digital card game I feel like is truly developed with like the smartphone mindset in mind. Like you can play a bunch of other digital card games on smartphone, but all the other ones that I've played feel like they're developed more for closer to a tabletop setting, and just with digital benefits. Like Hearthstone is way closer to Magic. I mean, it's definitely its own thing now, but like when it first came out, I just feel like this with its short games, its simple gameplay, and like the randomization that happens with the locations in particular, it lends itself to being on a smartphone specifically so well. If this were on a PC, like I would play I have played Hearthstone on my PC primarily. If Snap were on a PC, I don't think I would do it. The fact that it's on my phone and it's digested in these very discrete little moments, like I'll hop on like 2 to 4 times throughout the day and play like 2 to 3 games at a time. It's not a big commitment. It distracts me far less than actual social media does, so I can't even like be like I'm losing my life to this game. I can't let me that at it. Like it just sits in this perfect little homeostasis in my consumption life right now. I still will let myself like bounce out of it if it does get grindy or feels exploitative. But it hasn't hit that yet. Same. And I do keep holding on for hope that we're going to get to like match make and play with friends.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Like if it gets to a point where I do like not interested anymore, that's fine. I got enjoyment out of it so far. But yeah, I do think you're right that it's the ultimate phone game. And yeah, I'm really digging this current deck I'm running.
What are you running? Right
which
okay, so let's talk decks.
So the one for a long time I did do a kind of draw focused deck for a while. And then what was I running? I did play move for a while. But the deck I'm running now is like, I just think of it as like a big guy deck. It's basically like Electro, which I think is a pool 3 card.
Yep, so don't have him yet.
He gives you +1 energy each turn, but the trade-off is you can only play 1 card per turn.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. That's a card you build a deck around.
Yeah, so it is built around him, and then so I have some big hitters like Hulk, Giganto, who's like 14 power, but you can only play him on the left slot.
Yeah.
And then
how about the Infinite? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So I have those 3 in there, and then the other key piece of the deck is Professor X.
Ooh, God, I like. Okay, so here's the thing: both Storm and Professor X are cards that I love the design of. But I'm not a smart enough player to use them well.
well, here's the thing. I really bounced off Professor X at first too, because I love the like shutting down a lane ability. But he's only 3 power, and by the time it gets to turn 5, like it's usually hard to pull that off.
Yeah.
But what this Electro deck does is because I get +1 energy, I can play him on turn 4, and usually playing Professor X that early catches someone completely by surprise. So I'd say like 90-95% of games I'm just automatically winning that lane because I dump out Professor X on turn 4 and just grab that lane.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's like that's really the star of the deck is like Electro plus
like
Professor
honestly
X.
I think you hit it on the head. Being 5 cost is what makes Professor X more marginal, but yeah, being able to play him on turn 4 is a different thing entirely.
Yeah, and then turn 5
I
like
assume
I can play
Sunspot in that deck as well.
Yep, Sunspot in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and turn 5 I'm able to play out one of the 6 costers, and then turn 6 I can play another one, so it's getting 2 of the big guys out, and then plus Professor X. Yeah, it's working pretty well. Don't win every game, obviously, but it's a deck I'm really digging.
You could play perfectly, and there are some location flops that will just fuck you, and it doesn't matter what you do.
The thing I really love is like, say I'm playing against a move deck, and then you drop Professor X in the middle lane, and they just can't move fast.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get Electro, because that sounds fun. Because like a lot of the Sinister, like Lizard kind of synergizes with that, and Rhino. No, wait, not Rhino. Who's the one that also only allows 1 played per turn? Let me look up my list here.
I'm trying to think.
I think he's a 4-coster.
Oh, Sandman, right?
Yeah, Sandman.
Yeah.
Yeah, so players can only play 1 card per turn. Though I suppose that's probably redundant with Electro, isn't it?
I did have him in the deck for a while. I took him out because I got someone else who I liked more. It did kind of work well because if I was playing against the deck, which was like, let me span out a bunch of smaller people, then when I put Sandman down, like I'm already playing 1 per turn, but now they have to.
Yeah.
But the ones I'm playing out are stronger.
Yep.
Like I'm playing
exactly
out the big
it.
guys. So yeah. So it did work well.
So
I might go
Electro
back to it
only
at some
affects
point,
you?
but it's just you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes so much more sense. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you, like obviously your current deck has a specific curve to it. I'm sure. But like your average deck, what does your curve look like? Because I am like, for most decks that I consider to be functioning decks that I sometimes win with, at least, like half my deck is like 1 and 2 cost cards.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. It kind of, it does depend on the type of deck. Like this one is obviously different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say for most decks, that's about where it's at.
Okay.
Yeah. I think as time has gone on, like originally I was really focused on like, I need to get out cards in the early turns right away, but I've kind of gotten over that for certain decks. Like, it's okay if I don't play a card turn 1 or maybe even turn 2. But I think the interesting thing about Snap 2 is the meta actually changes as you go up in the pools and the people you play against. Like, when you're first starting out of the game, you play a lot of like, decks that are dumping out 1-costers, and then they use what's his face to bump the strength of all one costers. Like,
Oh, Kazar.
there's just Kazar. There's certain decks that get played, and then
then you hit your first Killmonger, and you're like, oh,
yep,
fuck this shit.
So that little meta of who you're playing against is interesting, and then like the cards you swap in and out. I don't know.
That's like, okay. So
there's
as we
a lot
sit
of
here
adapting.
talking about it, like the amount of depth and interaction there is within the card pool of this game is so much deeper than I initially appraised it when I was first starting to play. Like, so much so that I feel stupid for my initial thoughts. Well, it does roll it out to you in a certain way, and I think that's the biggest reason. But there's way more meat to this game than I initially thought.
For sure.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for episode 144. I always I'm always sad when we have people out, but also I kind of enjoy the 2 people episodes because what's interesting about our little friend group is obviously every 2 of us has a very different dynamic. And we are all separately friends with each other in our own ways, so it's just an interesting thing to see. And thank you for doing these episodes with me, Ian.
Same.
Appreciate you. All right, guys, we'll see you for 145. Bye.
Bye.